Hi investigators, Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy, bringing you a supplementary Spy Curious episode number 306, where I have been asked a question in one of my social media pages in relation to the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division and the incoming requirement for all investigators in Victoria to hold a security business licence. Now, this is going to be boring to anyone outside of Victoria and anyone who has no intent ever to investigate in Victoria. You can switch off now and you won't miss anything, because we have addressed this in episode after episode of Spy Curious and Investigations Uni. But I've been asked a question, and fair enough, that question does require a response. So this presentation is purely for people who want to have an understanding of where the County Court Amendment Act came from. The history of it is they have not done anything in Victorian licensing of significance in the security industry since 2001. To keep up to date with technology, with legislation, with acts, with evolving issues that happen. So in terms of that, they've been looking at what they can do as a coordinated response between the Victorian government, the Victorian police, the Victorian security industry, and the players within it. So they've done some consultation. VISIAC are the organisation that meets quarterly, and they discuss these issues. And last year they brought in the County Court Amendment Act 2024, and the big impact for that for the investigation industry in Victoria only. Okay, if you're in Tasmania, go and watch something else on YouTube right now, but in Victoria only, it's going to impact people down there. Well, how's it going to impact them? Well, anyone with an ABN who wants to have clients and employ other people in the investigation industry, basically they're going to have a security business licence, just like they do in New South Wales, Tasmania, and in South Australia, Western Australia, and Queensland. Big deal. Okay, so they all do it. A lot of people have been listening to other people in the industry who are uninformed about this, have no idea of the history and the dynamics, and they're going right off, and everybody's getting all upset. I've got to pay all this money to comply. Why do I have to? Blah, 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 blah. So today this is the question I'm going to answer. Please describe what benefit the County Court Amendment bring to the private investigation industry, whether for operators, the industry as a whole, or the wider community, because nobody else can see the benefits. Now, I don't know about that last sentence. That might be intended to be expressed in a different way. The way it reads is nobody else can see the benefits of all this, which is kind of sort of polarising. But I'll go through it and just explain how it all works. The County Court Amendment Act will come in I think it's May or June this year. The dates are in my other presentations, okay? Where do all these rumours and gossip and shit your pants panic come from in relation to what's happening in licensing in Victoria? Historically, Victoria is the home of the surveillance investigator sewing circle. It doesn't really happen in New South Wales. It did happen for a short while in Queensland, but then it stopped. Okay, it doesn't happen in South Australia, Western Australia, Tasmania, anywhere else. So what happens in these little sewing circles? Groups of surveillance subcontractors get bored in their role, sitting there from 5 a.m. in the morning till 2:30 in the afternoon, and nothing's happening. So they start sending texts and they start chatting on the phone. Then all their texts and all their phone calls, recordable on their bills or whatever, even on their burner phones, and they talk to each other. And they're all type A personality people, because you have to be that to be a licensed private investigator. There's no wallflowers in this industry. They're all my way or the highway type people. And, some will pretend to know that this is going on, be totally uninformed. Others will say, this is absolutely rubbish. We should build a Eureka stockade and attack the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division, who are only doing their job about the County Court Amendment Act, blah, blah, blah. All right, so it's a sewing circle of men, which is pretty sad. Okay, if you've ever been the victim of one of these sewing circles, it comes down on you like an avalanche, especially when you expose their activities. So do not ever expose their activities. Let me do that. Okay, all right. So they're guessing, they're uninformed, and they're rumours. All right, and then they pack up, go and have lunch, go and sit down, do their notes, do their recordings, and get on with their day after all the drama of sitting in the car, texting, messaging, and phone calls. All right. So this is where the rumours come from, that sewing circle. You don't see in any of my social media any factual or circumstance investigators in Victoria complaining about it. Why is that? Because they're all earning too much money and they're all very fully engaged in their employment. Simple as that. Okay, that's it. The Victorian County Court Amendment Act and training requirements are that the requirements will be confined to those who need them most and must be set out by the Chief Commissioner of Police, taking into consideration the need to keep the costs low for employers or already lowly paid workers. So this is what the issue is here. You've got people that aren't fully engaged, that aren't doing VWA or TAC surveillance. They're doing marital and relationship or domestic surveillance, as it's called in Victoria, or known by the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division. And they've got a lot of spare time. And they think, well, I'm not earning enough money on $20 an hour doing domestic surveillance, which is what they get if they do get paid. How the hell am I going to pay for another qualification and for an extra license? And that's where the panic and the rumour mill clicks in. I must add that I am fully aware of well over 100 surveillance operators in Victoria who never participate in social media, who are fully engaged 45 hours a week in their role, never take part in a sewing circle, are way out of that professionally, and they don't get involved in this sort of stuff. They're in the majority. Okay, the sewing circle ones are the same old ones, have been for the last 25, 30 years. Nothing has really changed except their communications technologies got a little bit better. So who's lowly paid in the Victorian investigation industry? Basically people who can't take statements and conduct interviews. People who can't conduct a record of interview, people who can't write reports, people who can't put a list of attachments in a report, and basically anyone who's half-assed and takes shortcuts and wants to get paid full professional dollar hourly rate and does 20% of the work to achieve that. They're the only lowly paid ones in the investigation industry in Victoria are the ones that can't do it. They did the cheapest course. They joined a sewing circle. They're not a member of an industry association. So what does being in an industry association, what's the benefits of that? Well, if you're an Australian Security Academy student, you're a member of AIRLAB, which is our professional industry association for licensed private investigators, government investigators, corporate investigators, risk management, fraud controllers, and workplace health and safety and mercantile agent professionals. It's not top secret. Anyone that is an Australian security graduate student has access to, every week, continuous professional development on information and stuff they can study over and above what was in their course, and they can download a statement of completion confirming that. This is what any profession is all about. The claims managers who instruct from the VWA or the TAC all have to do continuous professional development in insurance claims management. Lawyers and solicitors and barristers are obligated to do continuous professional development. Just because you're a licensed private investigator who did a cheapo, crapo course, a year ago, doesn't mean you are now James Bond, and you never have to study or improve your ability to do your job. No. Private investigation doesn't have an exemption from that, neither do lawyers, barristers, solicitors, detectives, claims managers, people with doctorates, or anybody else. They are continuous learners. So if you want to be lowly paid, all those things on your screen, if you don't do them very well, yes, you will be lowly paid. And surveillance, equally, is the lowest paying easy work, but it's very highly compensated hard work. Not impossible to do. The requirement for the qualification for a Victorian Security Business qualification is CPP 40719, Certificate for Security Management. Now, the Victorian Police have decided that that's the qualification that will be required for the individual to gain that security business qualification. It used to be Certificate 4 in Security Risk Management, then Certificate 4 in Security Risk Analysis, now Certificate 4 in Security Management. That's the one they chose. Now, why did they choose that? Well, it's the easiest one of the nationally recognised qualifications in the security industry. It really is an easy qualification to study. It's not diploma level. It's not degree level. It's just Certificate 4 level, and it's a business management qualification about running a security business. You don't have to study anything that's irrelevant. And there is a wide range of units of competency that are in it, some of which you've already got in your certificate through in investigative services, and they can be cross-credited towards it. How about that for amazing news? And if you're fortunate enough to be an Australian Security Academy student who's a graduate of it, I'm in Melbourne constantly, and I'm meeting with my students and graduates about recognition of prior learning in that qualification. Get in touch with me and we'll arrange an appointment. You do not have to have this qualification on the day it comes in. There'll be a period of transition which will be communicated by the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division. Let's go back to our original question. What benefits the private investigating industry, whether for operatives industry or as a whole for the wider community? What are they? Okay, let's have a look up. The Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division are in charge of regulating the training of licensed private investigators. RTOs, International Security Training Academy, and Professional Investigators College of Australia got together between them, committed fraud on 120 students who they told that Professional Investigation College of Australia was approved by the LRD to conduct training and assessment and had approved LRD trainers and assessors in Victoria. The Victorian Police found out about this little scam, which Professional Investigations College of Australia were running with ISTA, and they were paying them $145 a student to say that they studied at ISTA when they didn't. They didn't have a written partnership agreement as required with the Regulatory Authority for Training and Assessment, ASQA, under the 2015 standards. So there was no training partnership arrangement. There was no record of how the $145 bribes were paid on excess of 120 occasions that we actually know of. Now, there's probably a lot more. We only know of 120. Okay, how many more? The Victorian Police are not spilling. Okay, they're holding on to that one. So this is an example where 120 people were falsely lied to, issued with a qualification from 2 RTOs, 240 qualifications in total. Victorian Police found out about it, realised that Professional Investigation College of Australia had no registered trainers with the Victorian Police, had no approved course registered with the Victorian Police that they'd vetted and checked, had no approved assessments with the Victorian Police that they'd vetted and checked, did not hold a security business licence in Victoria. So they cancelled every one of those 120 plus qualifications and licenses that were issued to them after they applied and got their license. That's 120 victims of fraud in Victoria who potentially paid $1,600 each. Do the maths, multiply that out. Of which $145 was paid to co-conspirators, ISTA. Now you might think, they're registered training organisations. They can't do that. That's illegal. You're absolutely right. And the Victorian Police pulled them up on it. So there's a precedent set here because ISTA, the one that received the bribe money of $145 for 120 students, they were shut down by ASQA, the regulatory authority, and they were stopped being an LRD approved security and investigations training provider under the LRD's conditions of approval. But nothing happened to Professional Investigator College of Australia. No penalty applied whatsoever. So if you don't want to comply with the Victorian County Court Amendment Act 2024 and get a licence or a security business licence, and the Victorian Police come around, knock on your door and go, where's your security business licence? Have you done your risk assessments? Where's your standard operating procedures? How have you notified your subbies and your client of your risk assessment 24 hours before undertaking that security activity? You can say, well, why are you picking on me? You didn't do anything to Professional Investigations College of Australia. Now, this is very problematic and high risk. I don't recommend you do it because they won't take that at the LRD. They'll just shut you down. You can try it. It might feel better, but they might have had one that got away with it, but they're not going to have two that got away with it. That's one too many. So don't be a victim, right? Don't follow that line of thinking. Just because Professional Investigation College of Australia got away with it doesn't mean you're going to. They were 2 ex-New South Wales detectives, right? Okay, you're not. Don't try it. The Professional Investigation College of Australia director attempted to bribe 2 other Victorian-approved LRD RTOs with $145 cash incentives to keep their PI licence scam going once they knew ISTA was being shut down. The first attempted bribe was a telephone request through a female staff member at the direction of the Director of Professional Investigation College of Australia. Now, as a licensed private investigator, even though you might have been licensed in New South Wales or somewhere else, you never direct someone to undertake an investigation activity who was unlicensed. Never. So he's told a lady to make the phone call and offer a bribe to an RTO. Now, that RTO that former New South Wales detective directed that lady to go to was owned by an ex-New South Wales police officer who used to bust ex-New South Wales corrupt policemen. So that was seen through immediately, and it never happened. So they went to the next person, which was me. So the second attempt on the following day, which was the 13th of the 10th, 2021, he rang me personally, that ex-New South Wales detective who's a director of Professional Investigation College of Australia. And during that 9-minute conversation, he made 3 offers to me of $145 bribes, saying on one occasion that ISTA had no problem with it. Well, ISTA didn't, but the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division, who are in charge of licensing in Victoria and the training, they did. So they closed International Security Training Academy down. And to date, Professional Investigation College of Australia have received no penalty whatsoever. So now everybody's getting confused. Why did one get shut down, but not the other? Are they still investigating it? Do they not have the funding or the human resources for it? It doesn't seem right. This is the problem you get in the security industry when one's treated differently from another. One receives favourable treatment, gets away with it, and laughs all the way. The other one loses their business entirely. The other director at Professional Investigation College of Australia has his own problems. He was teaching on behalf of an RTO in Queensland called Peak Services. And he was teaching in the Toowoomba, Brisbane and Sunshine Coast City Council training program for Certificate for and Government Investigations. And during those instructional courses, he gave the students in his class an activity to do where they went away from their desk and had to be on the floor kneeling or laying down or whatever and do a quote, investigation activity. While they were doing that, he went round behind them and without their knowledge, without their consent, he took photographic images of them and published them on social media. Taking a photo of someone in Queensland without their knowledge or consent is a $300 criminal fine. The Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division have no responsibility for this whatsoever. Peak Services, the RTO, would have got the shock of their lives when the phone calls came through from Toowoomba City Council, Brisbane City Council and the Sunshine Coast City Council about why photographs of our staff appearing on social media. Now, some of the photos were published. How many photographs were taken? Nobody knows. Who's in possession of them today and what's being done with them? Nobody knows. Further problems that multiply beyond the boundary of individual and business security licensing and blew into approved LRD industry association. Now, this is where a large number of fee-paying members of the AIPI in Victoria, who are mostly unaware of this, have no control over it themselves, have suddenly found that they are members of an industry association where a RTO claims it does free memberships to that association, and that RTO has had 120 Victorian private investigator licences and qualifications cancelled. This is a bit of a please explain to the clients of those individual members of the AIPI. What if that comes up in court in one of our cases by a smart barrister who watches Vicarious and sees this sort of thing? This is a real problem. It's not the AIPI necessarily advertising this. The members are unaware of it, but Professional Investigation College of Australia are certainly saying it on their website. The Victorian Police LRD are responsible for approved industry associations in Victoria. Now, they may not know that this claim by Professional Investigation College of Australia, where they cancelled 120 qualifications and associated Victorian private investigator licences, has happened. But this is a rip-roaring problem that's exaggerated right back to when it first started earlier on. It's not just limited to a few graduates and a few bribes. It's ongoing. And the AIPI general membership in Victoria are totally unaware of it. If anyone complains to the Victorian Police Chief Commissioner about that association and the 120 cancelled licences of blah, 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 RTO association, vicarious association, whatever, the AIPI could lose its status as an approved industry association in Victoria by the Victorian Police. You might go, they'd never do that. They could end up in front of a disciplinary inquiry with the Chief Commissioner to explain why. Because the Chief Commissioner is fully aware of the risks to the clients of the AIPI membership and the vicariousness of that association. The Victorian Police didn't come down in the last shower. 86% of the complaints to the Victorian Police in regards to private investigators in Victoria is in relation to clients of a domestic vulnerable nature. That's known as coercive control in Queensland, coercive control in New South Wales, and stalking in New South Wales. So what's happening there is a large number of complaints about people conducting marital and relationship surveillance are coming into the Victorian Police LRD, where conversely, the number of complaints about the VWA investigators and the TAC investigators is absolutely minimal to the VWA and the TAC, and one or two might get to the Victorian Police, but not 86% of them, because they don't exist. Further exaggerating that, 86% of complaints of a domestic vulnerable nature of victims of domestic violence and coercive control in Victoria, where Victorian Police are attending 270 domestic violence incidents every day. Okay. Further to that, one surveillance operative in Victoria has multiple claims by people and complaints to the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division of sexual assault. He would isolate his victims in a surveillance van, tell them that they were coming with him for in the field training, which you don't get at a registered training organisation or anywhere like that. And he'd invite them in, they'd go along because they're starry-eyed, they wanted to be a private investigator, they wanted to find out all about the exciting world of surveillance. Then he would sexually assault them. I'm not talking one complaint or two complaints or three complaints or four complaints. There's a lot more. Now, if you could imagine, if that many people reported it, there'd be 10 times as many that didn't. That's how sexual assault works. That's a licensed private investigator in Victoria, still licensed today. The broader community includes people who want to become private investigators, Jeff, and they deserve to be protected from that sort of thing. Yeah, I agree. If they're mug enough to be so starry-eyed and excited and jump on the casting couch for what it is they want to get, with promises of employment and whatever, well, they're mugs, but they shouldn't be put in that position. No private investigator who's licensed, who does private investigations and has a successful investigation business, employs people, has a code of conduct, is a member of an industry association, wants to be associated with any private investigator that does that. And that private investigator is unemployable in the VWA and TAC industry in Victoria. So a bunch of subbies in a sewing circle getting together will not stop the County Court Amendment Act. It's not going to happen. All that resistance does in relation to that, sorry, just changing my screen. All that resistance does, people, is draw attention to the issues that required its introduction in the first place. Lack of training, people ignoring the training rules, sucking in 120 people, taking money off them, and giving them qualifications which were later cancelled by ASQA, and their private investigator application and issued licence was cancelled by the Victorian Police Licence and Regulation Division. The LRD's failure to enforce any penalty on Professional Investigations College of Australia and allow them to get away with it. Whereas their preparedness to enforce penalties on people in the future who don't put in a security risk assessment 24 hours before undertaking an investigation activity is going to be required. 86% of those complaints about being clients of a vulnerable domestic nature and multiple sexual assaults by one licensed private investigator. They just keep getting drawn attention to every time someone raises an issue about stopping the implementation of the County Court Amendment Act, which is boldly addressing and not ignoring and not hiding these things. Yes, sham contracting in the security industry, which has been going on since Persia attacked Greece in 24 BC, right? Okay, that's going to happen. And there'll be other ways around that some enterprising person will invent. But it's not just sham contracting. It's sham training. It's sham assessment. It's sham purporting to be an approved Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division RTO without an ASQA partnership arrangement between the two of them, which is a breach of the standards for RTOs of 2015, significant breach. A few weeks ago in Investigations Uni, I talked about the reliance between government departments who all had a very similar responsibility and how one would let down the other in their compliance of enforcement activities. That's natural. It's going to happen. All right, it's going to happen. But bringing in this is going to lessen what can happen as far as training, as far as knowing who the entity you are going to be engaging if you engage a security business or organisation. 2 years ago, a lady in Victoria received compensation after her husband's death of $500,000. She looked around for an investment and she found herself a security company in Victoria. She negotiated to and fro and she invested the $500,000 of his death insurance payout in that security company. The next day, the owner of that security company disappeared to the Middle East. She's lost $500,000. Basically, that was her nest egg for her retirement because the security industry was so vulnerable to this sort of thing and nobody cared. That's what happened, which is unfair. Now, he's got away with it. They can't touch him. She'll never get her money back. The County Court Amendment Act, where they know who the entity is that owns that security business, which they didn't know before, is a long way to preventing that kind of thing in the future. It won't prevent it all, but it's better than what we had earlier on. If I could give advice to anyone, compliance is what we do as investigators. You don't fight it. You don't get all twisted up in the game of a surveillance selling circle and a bunch of people who already hold a security business licence and a PI licence, but they haven't told you that. You're just a mug, right? And they're playing you. So if the compliance requirement is this, you do it. That's what investigators do. You don't swim against the tide and refuse to do it and go, oh, Professional Investigator College of Australia, they got away with it. Why are you picking on me? Won't work like that. You will not have you'll be kneecapped, shut down straight away. So firmest advice, get the qualification that you've been asked to get. It's not hard. It's the easiest nationally recognised qualification I think that I have on my 23 different qualifications, and you can go to over 50 RTOs to get it. The Victorian Police are understaffed, they're underfunded, but they are still kicking goals in their regulatory compliance enforcement activities. They're not going to come out in the newspaper and say this licensed private investigator has got multiple charges of sexual assault against him. They're not going to do that. That's detrimental to the industry. That's not what they're for. They're not going to come out and say, oh, this lady invested her husband's insurance payout for his death and this guy skipped the country with it. They're not going to do that. They're not going to tell you that. Neither are the people in the sewing circle. So the reality is there are people out there that will game the system in the investigation industry in Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, Tasmania, South Australia, Western Australia, Northern Territory, and the ACT, just like there are people that will internally steal from a bank. There are people that will do dodgy car repairs. Okay? There are people that think differently than honest people in their career. What we're all about in our career is exposing, investigating, and ensuring that those people don't go ahead with keeping up that sort of thing. I do hope that has answered the original question. I'll go back to it again. Got to get up close so I can see. Please explain what benefits the County Court Amendment bring to the private investigation industry, whether for operating the industry as a whole or for the wider community, because no one else can understand the benefits. The benefits are there'll be a crackdown on registered training organisations, their training and assessment, who they use for that training and assessment and how they're registered with the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division, who they work for and who they are. That's good. It's too easy to become an approved Victorian Police licensing, approved Victorian Police RTO. It's too easy for two New South Wales ex-detectives to work around the system and get in that and get away with it. Too easy. Because of underfunding and understaffing. Further benefits to this, if you do get this qualification, not just as a member of the wider community, but as a licensed private investigator, you are going to be able to conduct a security risk assessment. You will know how to do a security risk assessment on your circumstance investigation activity. Who you're sending to do that, if you employ other people, you will be doing that and registering it with the client 24 hours before. You'll understand the risks and the impact of those risks. You'll also do it for surveillance investigations as well. What you don't know, and what that brings to the table with all investigation agencies in Victoria, to become a security business, you have to have standard operating procedures. Investigators don't really have standard operating procedures. All security businesses do. But if you study your course at the Australian Security Academy, you get your standard operating procedures free with your study as well as your risk assessment templates, and you'll know what you're doing. Go back to my original comment, there are people who are lowly paid because they are poorly educated and they don't take part in CPD and ongoing professional development because they rely on the fact that they became a licensed private investigator 3 years ago and they knew everything on the day they graduated. That doesn't work in the legal industry. They have to do CPD. Doesn't work in the court system, the magistrates, judges, whatever. They have to do continuous professional development. It doesn't work in insurance claims because they have to do continuous professional development, in particular on the Insurance Contracts Act and stuff like that. These things are updated all the time, just like licensing in Victoria. And the fact that they're addressing it and the issues that affect investigators and the broader community is a really good thing. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy. Sure, everybody, you enjoy your investigations career in Victoria and make it a worthwhile and successful one by being compliant with the County Court Amendment Act 2024. I'll see you next week on Spy Curious, episode 300.